Something evil lurked in the shadows of Ravenwood, a town that time forgot. Something that fed on the souls of the missing and the terror of the living. Something that had been awakened by a blast in the mine, and that had a dark connection to a mysterious cult leader. Emily Thompson, a journalist from Boston, had come to Ravenwood to uncover its secrets, but she soon realized she had been lured into a trap. A trap that would force her to face her worst nightmare and to witness the horrors that dwelled beneath the surface of forgotten places. Horror story. Scary story. Emily Thompson had always been fascinated by mysteries. As a child, she devoured books about haunted houses, cursed objects, and unsolved crimes. As an adult, she became a successful journalist, specializing in investigative reporting and exposing the dark secrets of society. She had a knack for finding the truth, no matter how hidden or dangerous it was. That's why, when she received a letter from an anonymous source, claiming to have information about a series of mysterious disappearances in a small town called Ravenwood, she was intrigued. The letter was vague, but hinted at something sinister and supernatural lurking in the town. It also warned her not to trust anyone and to be careful of the shadows. Emily was skeptical but curious. She did some research on Ravenwood and found out that it was a remote and isolated community in the Appalachian Mountains, founded in the late 1800s by a group of coal miners. The town had a history of tragedy and violence, including a devastating mine collapse in 1920 that killed dozens of workers and left many others injured or missing. Since then, the town had been plagued by rumors of hauntings, curses, and cults. Emily also learned that, in the past 3 years, at least 6 people had vanished without a trace from Ravenwood, and that the local authorities had been unable or unwilling to solve the cases. Emily decided to go to Ravenwood and investigate the story. She packed her bags, grabbed her camera and notebook, and boarded a train to the nearest city. From there, she rented a car and drove for several hours, following a winding and poorly maintained road that led to the town. As she approached Ravenwood, she felt a chill in the air and noticed that the sky was overcast and gloomy. She saw a sign that read, "Welcome to Ravenwood, the town that time forgot." She wondered if that was a warning or a boast. She arrived in Ravenwood around noon and parked her car in front of the only hotel in town, a rundown and shabby building that looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 1920s. She checked in and was greeted by a grumpy and unfriendly clerk who gave her a key to a room on the second floor. She asked him if he knew anything about the disappearances, but he shrugged and said he didn't care. He told her to mind her own business and to stay away from the mine shaft, which was off-limits and dangerous. He also advised her to lock her door at night and to avoid wandering around after dark. He said that Ravenwood was not a place for outsiders, and that she would be wise to leave as soon as possible. Emily ignored his warnings and went to her room. She unpacked her things and looked out the window. She saw a bleak and desolate landscape, with barren hills, leafless trees, and dilapidated houses. She also saw the mine shaft, a dark and ominous hole in the ground, surrounded by a rusty fence and a sign that read, "Keep out." She felt a surge of curiosity and wondered what secrets it hid. She decided to explore the town and see if she could find anyone who would talk to her. She put on her coat and hat and grabbed her camera and notebook. She left the hotel and walked along the main street, which was almost empty and silent. She saw a few shops, a diner, a bar, a church, and a library, but they all looked closed or abandoned. She saw a few people, but they all avoided eye contact and hurried away when she tried to approach them. She felt like an intruder and a target. She reached the end of the street and saw a small park with a fountain, a bench, and a statue. She walked towards the statue and saw that it was a bronze figure of a man holding a pickaxe and a lantern. She read the plaque at the base of the statue and learned that it was a memorial for the victims of the mine collapse. She also saw a list of names and noticed that some of them were crossed out with red paint. She wondered what that meant and who had done it. She took out her camera and snapped a picture of the statue. As she did, she heard a voice behind her saying, "You shouldn't be here." She turned around and saw a man standing a few feet away from her. He was tall and thin, with pale skin, dark hair, and piercing blue eyes. He wore a black coat, a black hat, and a black scarf, and he had a cane in his hand. He looked at her with a cold and hostile expression and said, "Who are you, and what are you doing in Ravenwood?" Emily was startled by the man's sudden appearance and his hostile tone. She quickly regained her composure and said, "I'm Emily Thompson, a journalist from Boston. I'm here to write a story about Ravenwood and its mysteries." "And you are?" The man snorted and said, "A journalist. Huh. You're wasting your time. There's nothing to write about Ravenwood except that it's a dying town full of secrets and lies. And I'm Arthur Morgan, the town librarian, and the only person who knows the truth about this place." Emily sensed that Arthur was hiding something and felt a surge of curiosity. She said, "The truth? What do you mean? What's going on in Ravenwood? What about the disappearances? The hauntings? The mine shaft?" Arthur looked around nervously and said, "Not here. Not in the open. Follow me." He turned and walked away, heading towards the library. Emily hesitated, wondering if she could trust him. She decided to take a chance and followed him. They reached the library, a small and dusty building that looked like it hadn't been visited in years. Arthur opened the door and gestured for Emily to enter. She did, and saw a dimly lit room filled with shelves of old and dusty books. Arthur locked the door behind them and said, "This is the only safe place in town. The only place where the shadows can't reach us." Emily was puzzled and said, "The shadows? What are you talking about?" Arthur sighed and said, "Sit down. I'll tell you everything. But you have to promise me one thing. You have to promise me that you'll leave Ravenwood as soon as possible and never come back. And you'll never tell anyone what I'm about to tell you. Do you promise?" Emily nodded and said, "I promise." "Now tell me, what's going on in Ravenwood?" Arthur took a deep breath and began his story. He told Emily that Ravenwood was cursed, and that the curse had its origins in the mine collapse of 1920. He said that the mine collapse was not an accident, but a deliberate act of sabotage, orchestrated by a group of greedy and corrupt businessmen who wanted to take over the town and its resources. He said that the businessmen had hired a group of thugs who had planted explosives in the mine and detonated them when most of the workers were inside. He said that the explosion had killed dozens of miners and trapped many others underground. He said that the survivors had tried to escape, but had encountered something worse than death. Something that had been awakened by the blast. Something that had been waiting in the dark for centuries. Something that had fed on their fear and pain. Something that had taken their souls and turned them into shadows. He said that the shadows were the vengeful spirits of the miners, who had been twisted and corrupted by the dark force that dwelled in the mine. He said that the shadows had escaped from the mine and had haunted the town ever since. He said that the shadows could possess people and make them do terrible things. He said that the shadows could also take people and drag them into the mine, where they would suffer the same fate as the miners. He said that the shadows were responsible for the disappearances, and that no one was safe from them. He said that the shadows were also behind the hauntings, and that they could manifest in various forms, such as voices, visions, nightmares, or apparitions. He said that the shadows could also manipulate the town itself and make it change according to their will. He said that the town was alive and that it was a prison for the living and the dead. He said that he knew all this because he was one of the few survivors of the mine collapse. He said that he had been working in the mine that day and that he had been lucky enough to escape the blast. He said that he had seen the horrors that lurked in the mine and that he had barely made it out alive. He said that he had devoted his life to studying the history and the secrets of Ravenwood, and that he had learned that the dark force in the mine was an ancient and evil entity that had been worshipped by a cult of fanatics who had performed human sacrifices and dark rituals in its name. He said that the cult had been wiped out by a rival faction who had sealed the mine and the entity inside, hoping to contain its power. He said that the mine collapse had broken the seal and unleashed the entity and its minions. He said that the entity was the source of the curse, and that it wanted to destroy Ravenwood and everyone in it. He said that he had tried to warn the townsfolk and to stop the shadows, but that no one had listened to him. He said that most of the townsfolk were either in denial or under the influence of the shadows. He said that some of the townsfolk had even joined the cult and had become its servants. He said that the cult had a leader, a mysterious and powerful figure who had a personal connection to the entity. He said that the leader was the one who had sent the letters to Emily, and that he had a sinister plan for her. He said that the leader wanted to use Emily as a bait to lure Arthur into a trap and to sacrifice them both to the entity. He said that the leader wanted to complete a ritual that would unleash the entity and its full power and bring about the end of Ravenwood and the world. He said that he had found out about the leader's plan and that he had followed Emily to the park, hoping to save her. He said that he had recognized the leader and that he was shocked and horrified by his identity. He said that the leader was none other than... He never finished his sentence. As he was about to reveal the leader's name, the lights in the library flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. Emily heard a loud and sinister laugh coming from somewhere in the shadows. She heard Arthur scream and felt a cold and clammy hand grab her arm. She felt a sharp pain in her chest and a warm liquid trickle down her body. She realized that she had been stabbed and that she was bleeding. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. She tried to move, but she was paralyzed. She felt herself being dragged towards the door and into the night. She saw a flash of light and a glimpse of a face that she knew, a face that she trusted, a face that betrayed her. The last thing she saw before she lost consciousness was the sign that read, "Welcome to Ravenwood, the town that time forgot." Thank you for joining us for this spine-tingling story. We hope you found it both thrilling and thought-provoking. If you enjoyed this video, please consider participating in our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing it with your friends. Your support goes a long way in helping us create more engaging content for you. Goodbye, and may you always tread carefully in the world of the unknown.